At 11:34 hours on March 28, 1942, Commander Robert Ryder stood on the bridge of HMS Campbeltown and ordered maximum speed. The destroyer's 4 boilers pushed her to 19 knots. Ahead, 1,000 meters away, the massive caisson gate of the Normandy dry dock loomed in searchlight beams. German tracer fire crossed the water from both banks of the Loire estuary. Shells struck Campbelltown's bridge. Both helmsmen were hit. One died instantly. The second collapsed wounded. Lieutenant Commander Stephen Beatty took the wheel himself. At 11:34 hours, Campbelltown struck the gate at 19 knots. The impact drove her bow 10 meters onto the caisson. The forward section compressed like an accordion. Inside that compressed bow, concealed in reinforced steel and concrete casing, 4.5 tons of depth-charge explosive sat connected to delayed action fuses. The fuses were set to detonate in 8 to 10 hours. German engineers would have until approximately 1,000 hours to discover and disable them. They failed. The story begins in January 1942, at the Admiralty in London, where naval planners were studying the problem of Tirpitz. The German battleship displaced 52,600 tons fully loaded. Length overall was 251 meters. Beam was 36 meters. Draft was 10.6 meters. Maximum speed was 31 knots. Main armament consisted of 8 15-inch guns in 4 twin turrets. Secondary armament included 12 5.9-inch guns, 16 4.1-inch guns, and numerous anti-aircraft weapons. Armor protection was substantial. Belt armor reached 320 millimeters. Turret faces were 360 millimeters. The ship was effectively a mobile fortress capable of destroying any convoy escort and then systematically sinking every merchant vessel in the convoy. Tirpitz was based in Norwegian fjords. From there, she threatened the North Atlantic convoy routes, supplying Britain and the Soviet Union. Her mere presence forced the Royal Navy to maintain heavy units in home waters to counter her if she sortied. 2 King George V-class battleships and supporting vessels remained tied to the home fleet specifically to counter Tirpitz. These ships could not be deployed to the Mediterranean or Pacific where they were needed desperately. Tirpitz was achieving strategic effect without firing a shot. This situation was unacceptable. Direct attack in Norwegian waters was dangerous. The fjords were narrow. Air attack was difficult because mountains limited approach angles. Torpedo bombing required calm water and clear skies. Tirpitz had anti-aircraft guns and fighter protection. Multiple attacks in 1941 had failed. The battleship remained undamaged and operational. Alternative strategies were required. The Admiralty identified one critical vulnerability. If Tirpitz were damaged, she would need a dry dock for repairs. Her dimensions exceeded the capacity of every German dry dock except one. The Normandy dock at Saint-Nazaire in occupied France was the only facility on the Atlantic coast capable of accommodating her. The dock had been constructed between 1928 and 1932 to service the French ocean liner Normandy. It was 350 meters long, 50 meters wide, and could be drained to a depth of 15 meters below sea level. The massive caisson gates weighed 1,500 tons each and were controlled by hydraulic mechanisms housed in pump rooms adjacent to the dock. If the dock were destroyed, Tirpitz would have nowhere to go if damaged. She would have to return to Germany through waters controlled by British forces. This would expose her to attack by home fleet units, submarines, and aircraft. The risk would be unacceptable. German naval command would keep Tirpitz in Norwegian waters where she could not effectively interdict Atlantic convoys. Destroying the dock would neutralize Tirpitz without directly attacking her. Combined Operations Headquarters received orders to plan an operation to destroy the Normandy dock. The assignment went to Captain John Hughes Hallett, who had overseen planning for several commando raids in 1941. Hughes Hallett analyzed the problem throughout February 1942. Aerial bombing was rejected. The dock was heavily reinforced concrete. Bombs would not penetrate sufficiently to cause catastrophic damage. The caisson gates were massive steel structures. Explosive tonnage required to destroy them exceeded what bombers could deliver accurately at night. Ground assault was impossible. Saint-Nazaire was hundreds of kilometers from neutral territory. Parachute assault was impractical. The drop zones would be detected and German forces would respond before the commandos could reach the dock. Hughes Hallett proposed a naval assault. A ship laden with explosives would ram the caisson gate at high speed. The impact would wedge the ship onto the gate. Delayed action fuses would detonate the explosives hours later. destroying the gate and the ship simultaneously. The explosion would occur after attacking forces had withdrawn, preventing casualties from the blast. Commando parties would land from escorting vessels and destroy pumping stations, operating machinery, and lock gates throughout the dock complex. The operation would cripple St. Nazaire permanently. The concept required an expendable ship with shallow draft and sufficient speed to ram effectively. HMS Campbeltown was selected. She had been built in 1919 as USS Buchanan, a Wicks-class destroyer for the United States Navy. Displacement was 1,090 tons. Length was 95.8 meters. Beam was 9.4 meters. Draft was 2.7 meters. In September 1940, she was transferred to Britain under the Destroyers for Bases Agreement and renamed HMS Campbeltown. She was obsolete. Her machinery was worn. Her armament was inadequate by 1942 standards. She was expendable. Conversion began at Devonport in March 1942. Workers removed all equipment not essential to the mission. Torpedoes, depth charge racks, and most of the anti-aircraft guns were stripped. Weight reduction decreased draft to 2.4 meters, allowing navigation in the shallow Loire estuary. Armor plating 3 millimeters thick was welded to the bridge and exposed positions. This provided minimal protection against small arms fire but not against artillery. The 4 funnels were reduced to 2 by cutting and angling the forward pair to resemble German torpedo boats. This disguise would allow Campbeltown to approach St. Nazaire flying German colors without immediate challenge. The explosive charge was designed by Lieutenant Nigel Tirpitz, a 28-year-old explosives expert from the Royal Engineers. Tirpitz specified 24 depth charges, each weighing 180 kilograms, to be cemented together in a steel and concrete casing installed in the bow. Total explosive weight was 4,320 kilograms. The casing was positioned forward of the collision bulkhead so impact would not damage it. 3-time delay fuses of different designs were installed to ensure detonation even if 1 or 2 failed. The fuses would activate on impact and detonate 8 to 10 hours later. Lieutenant Commander Stephen Beatty assumed command on March 20th. He was 33 years old. He had commanded destroyers since 1939 and had participated in the Norwegian campaign in 1940. He understood that his mission was sacrificing his ship. He would ram the dock gate at maximum speed. The impact would destroy Campbeltown's bow. She would be immobilized. German forces would attempt to move her. They would have approximately 8 hours before the explosion. Beatty's crew would scuttle the ship to prevent removal. Then, they would abandon her and attempt to escape aboard motor launches. The commando force was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Newman of No. 2 Commando. Newman was 37 years old. He had served in the Territorial Army before the war and received command of No. 2 Commando in March 1941. His force consisted of 265 commandos drawn from multiple commando units. They were organized into assault teams, demolition teams, and protection teams. Assault teams would suppress German defenders. Demolition teams would destroy dock machinery. Protection teams would cover the withdrawal. Training lasted 3 weeks. The commandos rehearsed on dock facilities in Britain similar to St. Nazaire. They practiced landing from small boats under simulated fire. They practiced placing explosive charges on machinery within time limits. They practiced withdrawing under pressure. Newman established passwords. War Weapons Week was the challenge. Weymouth was the response. The Germans would struggle to pronounce the W correctly. This would identify them as hostile. The assault force departed Falmouth on March 26 at 1400 hours. Commander Robert Ryder commanded the naval force from motor gun boat 314. The force consisted of HMS Campbeltown, destroyers HMS Atherstone and HMS Tyndale, motor torpedo boat 7th Flotter, 16 motor launches, and MGB 314. Total personnel numbered 611. The force would cross the English Channel, enter the Bay of Biscay, approach the Loire estuary, and ascend the river 6 kilometers to St. Nazaire. Expected arrival was at 1:30 hours on March 28th. The voyage was uneventful until the final approach. On March 27th at 2200 hours, submarine HMS Sturgeon surfaced to provide navigational reference. The destroyers Atherstone and Tyndale remained outside the estuary as reserves. At 2330 hours, Royal Air Force bombers began attacking St. Nazaire. The bombing was intended to distract German defenders and suppress anti-aircraft fire. Weather prevented accurate bombing. The aircraft dropped ordnance randomly, without hitting significant targets. The bombing alerted German forces that something unusual was occurring, but did not suppress their weapons.
At 00 hours on March 28th,
Campbeltown raised a German naval ensign and entered the Loire estuary. The motor launches formed two columns on either side. The formation resembled a German convoy. Range to St. Nazaire was 6 kilometers. The river depth was variable. Campbeltown grounded twice on mudbanks but pushed through. By 0100 hours, the force was 3 kilometers from the dock. German searchlights activated intermittently but did not fix on the convoy. At 0120 hours, German searchlights illuminated Campbeltown. Kapitän Soze Karl Konrad Mecke, commanding the 22nd Naval Flak Brigade, had suspected the bombing raid was a diversion. He ordered searchlights activated and guns manned. The British formation was now visible. Mecke signaled Campbeltown to identify herself. Beatty transmitted a coded German identification signal obtained from intelligence sources. The signal claimed Campbeltown was a German ship damaged by bombing and requesting permission to proceed to dock. The deception gained 3 minutes. At 0123 hours, German forces opened fire. Every gun position along both banks of the Loire engaged the convoy. 75 mm, 88 mm, 105 mm, and 280 mm guns fired simultaneously. 20 mm and 40 mm anti-aircraft weapons engaged at close range. The motor launches were wooden-hulled. Shells penetrated them easily. Multiple launches caught fire within the first minute. Campbeltown increased speed to 19 knots. Shells struck her bridge, killing one helmsman and wounding the second. Beatty took the wheel. The ship was under continuous fire from multiple directions. Casualties mounted, but the ship remained maneuverable. The anti-torpedo net protecting the dock entrance loomed ahead. Campbeltown's reinforced bow struck the net at 19 knots. The net parted. Campbeltown continued through. At 0134 hours, Campbeltown struck the caisson gate. The impact drove her bow 10 meters onto the gate structure. The forward section compressed, steel buckled, frames collapsed. But the explosive casing held intact. The depth charges were undamaged. The fuses activated. Detonation would occur at approximately 1,000 hours. Commandos scrambled from Campbeltown before she fully stopped. They ran across her bow onto the caisson and spread throughout the dock complex. Demolition teams carried rucksacks containing 40 to 90 kilograms of explosives. They moved to assigned targets: pump houses, winding houses, operating machinery for the caisson and lock gates. Targets were destroyed systematically. The commandos placed charges, lit fuses, and withdrew. Explosions began at 0140 hours and continued for 90 minutes. German resistance was confused initially but organized quickly. The garrison at St. Nazaire numbered approximately 5,000 troops. Most were naval personnel and anti-aircraft crews. Infantry reinforcements arrived within 30 minutes. Fighting became intense. Commandos used Thompson submachine guns, Bren guns, and grenades. Germans used rifles, machine guns, and mortars. The fighting spread throughout the dock area. Commandos captured German positions temporarily, then withdrew when counterattacked. The motor launches attempted to evacuate commandos from designated positions. German fire destroyed most launches before they could embark personnel. Of 16 launches, only 5 survived to evacuate troops. 3 were destroyed on the return voyage. Only 2 reached Britain. The majority of commandos could not be evacuated. They attempted to escape overland toward Spain. Most were captured within days. Newman realized evacuation had failed by 0230 hours. He ordered commandos to break into small groups and attempt independent escape. The order acknowledged that most would be captured. Newman himself was captured on March 28th while attempting to reach the Spanish border. He would spend the remainder of the war in German prisoner-of-war camps. Beatty scuttled Campbeltown at 0145 hours. Explosive charges detonated in the engine room and magazines. The ship settled onto the caisson but remained structurally intact. The bow remained wedged on the gate. The explosive charge remained undisturbed. Beatty and his crew abandoned ship and were captured immediately. They were taken to German headquarters in St. Nazaire for interrogation. Throughout the morning of March 28th, German engineers inspected Campbeltown. They observed the damaged bow and assumed it resulted from the ramming impact. They did not realize the bow contained explosives. At approximately 1,000 hours, a group of 40 German officers and civilians toured the ship. They were examining the damage and discussing how to remove the vessel. At 11:35 hours, the fuses completed their cycle. 4,320 kilograms of explosive detonated. The explosion was catastrophic. The entire forward section of Campbeltown disintegrated. The caisson gate was destroyed completely. The dock basin flooded instantly. 2 tankers moored in the basin were swept away by the wall of water. One capsized. The other crashed into the far end of the basin. The pump houses and winding mechanisms were destroyed by the blast wave. The 40 Germans touring Campbeltown were vaporized. Approximately 320 additional German personnel within 200 meters were killed by blast or debris. British prisoners at German headquarters heard the explosion. They had been waiting to see if the charges would detonate. The explosion confirmed the operation had succeeded. One prisoner, Captain Robert Montgomery of No. 2 Commando, recalled that captured commandos began cheering. Their German guards were too shocked to respond. The dock they were guarding no longer existed. Aerial reconnaissance aircraft photographed St. Nazaire repeatedly through 1942 and 1943. The photographs showed Campbeltown's wreckage wedged in the remains of the caisson gate. The dock basin was empty. No ships occupied it. The facility was inoperative. The photographs confirmed the operation had achieved its objective. The Normandy dock would not be available for German use. German engineers attempted repairs throughout 1942. The caisson gate had been destroyed. A new gate would require manufacturing in Germany and transporting to St. Nazaire. Allied air attacks made this impossible. Engineers installed temporary barriers but could not restore the dock to operational status. By 1943, German Naval Command accepted that St. Nazaire was unused for capital ship repairs. Tirpitz would have to remain in Norway. The strategic result was exactly as planned. Tirpitz never left Norwegian waters for Atlantic operations. She remained in Trondheim and later Altenfjord, conducting occasional sorties against Arctic convoys. She never engaged the home fleet in decisive action. On November 12, 1944, Royal Air Force Lancaster bombers struck Tirpitz with tallboy bombs while she was moored in Tromsø. 3 bombs hit. Tirpitz capsized and sank. Over 1,000 crew members died. The battleship that had required the home fleet's attention for 3 years was destroyed without ever accomplishing her intended mission. Whether the St. Nazaire raid prevented Tirpitz from operating in the Atlantic is debatable. German naval doctrine emphasized avoiding combat unless strategic advantage was certain. Tirpitz's commanders were cautious. They sortied only when intelligence suggested targets were vulnerable and risks were acceptable. The absence of repair facilities at St. Nazaire made those risk calculations more conservative. Whether Tirpitz would have operated differently with St. Nazaire available cannot be determined. What is certain is that St. Nazaire was destroyed, and Tirpitz never used it. The human cost was severe. Of 611 personnel who participated, 169 were killed and 215 captured. Only 5 commandos successfully escaped to Spain and eventually reached Britain. The 5 Victoria Crosses awarded for the raid was the highest number for any single operation to that point in the war. Lieutenant Commander Beatty received the Victoria Cross for commanding Campbeltown during the ramming. Lieutenant Colonel Newman received the Victoria Cross for leading the commandos. Sergeant Thomas Durrant received the Victoria Cross posthumously for manning an exposed machine gun position despite repeated wounds. Able seaman William Savage received the Victoria Cross posthumously for continuing to fire his gun after being mortally wounded. Commander Ryder received the Victoria Cross for commanding the naval force. The recognition acknowledged extraordinary courage under impossible conditions. The raid was planned as a one-way mission. Evacuation was hoped for but not expected. Every participant understood they were likely to die or be captured. They proceeded anyway because the objective was strategically necessary. This calculation, trading certain casualties for strategic advantage, defined special operations throughout the war. The German response to captured raiders was correct according to Geneva Convention requirements. Prisoners were treated as prisoners of war, not executed as saboteurs or spies. This contrasted with German treatment of commandos in other operations where Hitler's commando order mandated execution. The St. Nazaire prisoners survived the war in POW camps. Many attributed this to the fact that regular German naval personnel captured them rather than SS or Gestapo forces. Post-war analysis documented the operation's effectiveness. The Normandy dock remained inoperative until 1948. Repairs required 6 years because resources were unavailable during the war and immediate post-war period. The facility was eventually restored and operates currently as part of the port of St. Nazaire. The wreck of Campbeltown was removed during reconstruction. No physical remnant of the raid remains at the site. Memorials to the raid exist in Britain and France. A memorial at Falmouth commemorates the departure point. A memorial at St. Nazaire honors the raiders and French civilians killed in the operation. The town of Campbeltown in Scotland maintains a relationship with the French town. HMS Campbeltown's ship's bell, recovered during the raid, was displayed in Campbeltown, Pennsylvania, then loaned to a new HMS Campbeltown commissioned in 1989. The bell was returned to Pennsylvania in 2011 when that ship decommissioned. The tactical lessons from St. Nazaire influenced subsequent operations. The concept of using an explosive-laden ship as a weapon was not repeated because circumstances did not require it, but the coordination between naval forces and commandos became standard doctrine. The use of diversionary bombing to cover approach became routine. The acceptance of high casualties for strategic objectives became normalized in special operations planning. The legacy of Campbeltown is the demonstration that obsolete equipment properly employed could achieve strategic effects. The ship was 40 years old. Her engines were worn. Her weapons were obsolete. But she had sufficient speed and strength to ram a dock gate and sufficient volume to carry explosives. These capabilities were adequate for the mission. Modern equipment was not necessary. This lesson mattered in 1942 when Britain was critically short of modern warships. Sacrificing an obsolete destroyer was acceptable if it neutralized a battleship. This is HMS Campbeltown, built in 1919, transferred to Britain in 1940, converted to a floating bomb in March 1942, rammed into St. Nazaire on March 28, 1942, detonated on March 28 at 11:35 hours, destroyed the Normandy dock, killed 360 Germans, neutralized Tirpitz without engaging her, earned 5 Victoria Crosses for her final mission. The ship that was a bomb that saved convoys, that kept Britain supplied, that allowed the war to continue. That was her contribution. 40 years old and expendable, until she became essential.